Welcome back to another episode of Hole Design 101, and you join me here at St Cyrus, where we're going to be taking a look at the 3-shot par 5, which is one of the most interesting holes that you can design. And really we're going to think about this as a long par 5, so a par 5 that you don't necessarily expect to reach in 2 shots. Now you'll notice that we're coming back down the 11th at St Cyrus, winner of last year's CC contest, and that's because this type of hole is best understood from the green backwards. You really have to be thinking on what-if scenarios, and from that point of view I think it's one of the most strategic holes that you can design. Now there are a number of different ways in which you can accomplish this sort of hole, and ways in which you can ramp up the challenge. We're going to look at a couple of them and what kind of absolute musts and do nots are. But I hope that you enjoy the video and it gives you a bit of insight into a hole that really isn't very widely used, and I don't think it should be used that widely either. Most par 5s you're going to want to get home in 2, but it can provide a nice bit of spice and make a really strategic hole. So I think the first message with this type of hole is that you've got to understand what your relationship with par is. On this sort of a hole, par is a solid score. You're normally going into a par 5 every time thinking of birdie. But here, on a 3-shot par 5, partly because of distance, partly because of how you've set it up, par is fine, 5 is okay, 4 is doable, and you're taking the eagle pretty much completely out of play. Now, we're looking here at Old Ainsdale's 13th, which is our long par 5, and one of only 2 on the course, and I'll talk a little bit more about that mentality when we get there. But really with this one, we wanted to make it that you've got to a par 5, it's a major course, it's the first one you've hit on the round, and it's not an auto birdie and you're wishing it was. Now the second part of this hole that really has to be factored in and is the hardest one to do is that every single shot has to matter, which means you have to make the tee shot important but not take you out of the game. You have to make the second shot really matter but not take you out if you're bailing out. And finally, the green or the pitch on can't just be monotonous or boring. So you've got a lot of hoops to jump through to make this hole really shine, because none of those 3 shots can be boring. Now I do think that this is the best of those holes that I've designed. I had help from JoeGolferG in sculpting and working through some of this, but the idea I think was mine. The reason for that is that you couldn't switch off on any single shot, and each shot asked you a question whilst giving you bailout options that gave you marginally less room for getting that birdie at the end. So of those though, the one that is the most important that you have to nail is the second shot. You cannot just be having people bunting a 3-wood up the fairway to a wide open fairway with no hazards in play, because it's boring and because they simply just can't reach the green. You've got to make them work, you've got to make them think where the best position is, you've got to make them think what their best leave is in terms of distance, direction, and you've got to make getting to that best position challenging. Now it's for that reason that I really love making these sorts of holes. There's all sorts of strategy that goes into it, and again we're going to start with the green because we're going to work backwards from that, but the key with all of this is going to be making that second shot shine. If you're asking people to bunt a 3-wood down the fairway, you've got to make that shot matter, and that is a lot more difficult to do than it sounds. So here we are at Kaiuma Bay, and we're on the second hole, which is the longest par 5 probably I've ever made. I think it's topping up at near 700 yards, and you can see immediately that you can't reach the green. It's simply too far away. And you can just hit 3-wood, but it's not a straightforward shot. So when I say make the second shot matter, what I don't want to happen is for you to think just hitting 3-wood straight in front of you is the best play. Can you go for this? You sort of could. You could choke it up into this area, but you've got a relatively, it's going to be lie dependent, and if you leave it there, is that sort of a pitch or chip or splash or flop or whatever you want, is that really the shot you want left in? We've also then got to consider what angle do you want to come in from. Well, if I'm hitting 3-wood, am I maybe running into that heavy rough? So you'll notice I've contoured this so it sort of runs away. So you've got to be a little bit careful, and then you're playing back here. Well, if you're playing much further back, then this bunker maybe just takes that middle of the fairway option away. Looking back on this course, I don't think you really need it. You could have had the camber do the work, but the bunker's a visual in a way that the camber just isn't. And it wasn't really a bunker many people would end up in. We could play all the way out here, which is safer. Does it give you a better angle into the pin? It's going to depend, and we'll have a bit more on that later. Or do I want to lay up to a full wedge distance? You remember the old game, and indeed this game, pitch shots left in are a nightmare. So do I really want to be up here and have kind of a partial, very feely shot that might run out a little bit more? Or do I want to be dropping back to hit a full wedge? Now you'll also notice this bunker is positioned pretty much right where that full wedge is. And it's a little bit gamed up, I'd say, as a shot or a placement. But that's really what it's there for. It's, well, people want to hit dead down the centre to full lob wedge range. We're going to protect that a little bit. So they can go a little bit wider, no problem, loads of space. You want to lay back of this bunker even further? You want to hit a 7-iron on your second shot on a long par 5 or an 8-iron? Be my guest, you'll leave the same in again, but it's completely safe. So with this second shot, what you've really got to do more than anything else is try to find a decision, I think, and give people a bit of choice into how they want to play the hole. It's not necessarily what's the right way to do it, what's the wrong way to do it, but give them an option as to where they're laying up. Make that shot interesting rather than just, oh, that's where a game's aiming me, point, shoot. With this sort of sloping, your green, as we've always said, is intensely tied to everything else you do. Now, if I'm getting at this pin, I deliberately wanted you to have a choice as to which way you went. So you might be thinking, well, if we look at the pin, we look at where we're coming in from, maybe I want to go here because if I land it short, I can really roll it up, whereas if I'm coming on from this side, margin for error vertically is a little bit less. But you might also see that slope behind it and think, well, I could use that as a backstop and roll it up towards it. I deliberately wanted for certain pins for you to have a bit more of an element of choice. Now we'll come back to this green later on and look at what the other pin positions are and how those dictated it. I think this green was one of the most fun ways of defending this hole. But all of it comes down to where do you choose to put your approach to give you that shot in at the pin. So I think really rule number one though has to be with this course, how can you make your second shot interesting and design from that backwards. So I was going to here and thinking, well, if I know there's layup zone A, layup zone B, really overreaching layup zone C, D, E, like F maybe, and coming all the way back to here, and then thinking, well, maybe people are laying up here. You know you've taken the green out of play, but what can you do with all of those other areas? How can you make people consider this side or this side or this side or this side? With this one, it's really the second shot that forces the decision. Off the tee, you'll notice you have to hit, and this is Evangelist, people might know it very well having just played Q School. You have to hit, if you're going to hit driver, you have to hit this hard left hook to really open up the green and open up the opportunity of going for it. So it's not a true three-shotter in terms of distance, but it is in terms of where you leave yourself. When I was playing this, I played 5 wood down to here all 3 days, and that's when it got really interesting for me, because actually this stays really true to our maxim of the second shot is the one that counts. If you play to the fat area, you are left with a really tough carry to this right hand side, which has your better angle into the green. Or if you're going over to the left, you've got actually quite a tight little sliver of fairway to hit. So I was playing out to this area and basically laying up on both of the first 2 shots, which I thought was really different for a 3-shot par 5. And I think I birdied it twice and parred it twice. Might have got a bogey on one of them, I can't really remember. What it did do was it allowed people to take the risk on the first shot or the second shot, depending on how they chose it. And then, as we talked about earlier, with that second shot, you really have, I mean, look at the width of angles you can go for. You can go from that angle or from there, depending on where you play your second shot to, how bold you are with it, and what exact angle you want to open up. This might not have been everyone's favourite par 5 in terms of how it did danger, but you can't deny that there was danger pretty much everywhere on this one, and I think from that point of view it really succeeded with what it wanted to do. Moving on to our next 3-shot par 5, and we're actually looking at a real course, and this one is the outstandingly done Peninsula Kingswood North course by Heisenberg, which is just a dream, and if you haven't played it yet, do go and play it. It's the best RCR I think I've played in game, not using LiDAR, this side of Augusta probably. And we're looking at the 16th, which is a 3-shot par 5 in real life. Maybe doesn't play all its yardage in game with the stupid driver and stupid 3-wood we have, but it has a lot of those concepts to it. Now, first of all, we're looking back down at the green, and you can immediately see that you've got trees that are overhanging, which means that you're going to have to work the ball, and that second shot is going to be interesting if you are going for the green. If you're not going for the green, you've got decisions as to where you lay up. Do you hit over the trees to a blind area where there's a little bunker lying in wait? Are you playing out here, which means that you're bringing this front bunker more into play? It's just a wonderfully designed hole. I think the main thing I want to look at with this one is the green itself. And whilst the second shot is of paramount importance, you've then got to make sure that the pitch shot on is not benign. Now, we've talked about this same concept with short par 4s and short par 3s. You're expecting people to approach this with wedge in hand, so you probably know what I'm going to be saying, which is that you need to have a green that reflects that. This green needs to be tough. It shouldn't be accepting a 3-wood. It shouldn't be accepting a driver off the deck. It shouldn't be really rewarding those as much. And if you think this is a real course, this is a pretty treacherous green. You've got to have tiny little landing zones on it, and you could funk this green up a little bit more than it is. But you've really got to make sure that people should be playing this with like a pitch shot from about here. So we're looking at what? A 63-yard pitch shot. You can be ultra precise with that shot. Therefore, let's make the green demand that. Look at this little false front that's coming off. That's going to give you some nightmarish putts. This pin's tough to access. You're going to be thinking, well, for getting at that one, you've got to be somewhere over here, which again forces that decision. If this green were benign, that wouldn't be happening anywhere near as much. Same with this pin. Then you've got this little shelf at the top, which I really like. So the second point I would make, and we'll look at another course as an example of this, but in addition to making that second shot matter, you've then got to make that third shot not feel like an anticlimax. Let's still see that be important, and that it's not just a simple hit shot there and then the pitch shot is automatic to within 2 feet and then a birdie. Obviously you still want to allow birdie. You don't want to make it like stupidly tricked up, but it's got to have that element of danger in, with even with a pitch shot in hand, that you could be running off here and struggling for an up and down. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about is the tee shot. And we're back at that 11th at St Cyrus that you saw right at the back of the intro. And the question with this one is making it matter without necessarily taking someone completely out of play. So the hole is already 613 yards long, which means that we're probably not getting home in 2 in any case. And what Dan did was give us loads of fairway this side to use, which actually shares a fairway with the 10th, I think. Yeah. But if we're going this way, we're probably wanting to lay up a little bit, at least with this driver. Or we've got the option of hitting this really narrow fairway on the right hand side. And what that did, if I remember rightly, was opened up an extra area up here. So we're going back to kind of planning from your second shot onwards, this approach shot. If you'd gone right off the tee and hit this sort of tee shot down this little channel here, you were able to reach this area for your layup in a way that if you'd bailed out off the left, you were no longer able to. You didn't have the distance to get there. You also therefore couldn't reach this long left area, and you certainly couldn't reach the green. You couldn't reach the green anyway. And that meant you were playing back to around about here, which was a full wedge in. This hole was just remarkably well done in kind of every single way because of the way in which everything worked in harmony. Now you then, in actual fact, with this pin, you look at the green and you see this giant slope in front of it and how it bleeds into the green. Well, in reality, I kind of want to be coming in from the left anyway. So if I can reach this, so much the better, but the further up and left I can get, the better this is going to be. But I think what this hole rather, did a really good effort, a really good job with, was making the tee shot matter. Try to hit this tiny sliver of the fairway, and my tempo is not great, so we probably won't. Oh, you never know. Oh, once in a blue moon. And then you'll notice that actually we can reach this area. The question is where we want to go. Well, now I've got an option open to me that wasn't before. I can try to hit all the way over here, but I probably won't reach it. I would love to get down to that little swale. And actually with this sort of wind, maybe the driver off the deck could be the option, but it's a really risky way of doing it, because if I'm ending up this side, I'm facing a really tough up and down over there. And particularly playing a slow, that makes like this a little bit trickier. I've got the slightly safer option of laying back down to here, but that's probably taking birdie out of play. Or we can try and hit the driver up this side. Probably a little bit more margin for error. Maybe we try that. But again, you'll see that the option off the tee really opened up that option on the second shot. And now we're left with a third shot where actually, having played the bold first shot and a bit of a bold, but more than bold, like a sensible second shot that was going to open up this angle, I'm now left with a pitch shot that would hopefully yield me a birdie. Might still muck this up, but... And we've hit the fast. So even then, the pitch shot still kind of mattered, and we're left with a decent putt because, hey, we've executed a couple of our options pretty well. But you can see from this hole and how it's been designed that every single one of those 3 shots really did matter, and we do end up with the birdie. I wanted to finish up by analysing one hole, and that being the 13th at Ainsdale, because I think it's the best version of this type of hole I've done. Now firstly, you've got that short par 3 sort of green, which we'd looked at earlier. You can see you've got this little shelf on the front, which is going to be tricky to hold. It's really designed for a pitch shot. You've got these front to back sloping greens, which bleed into this bunker as well, both sides. It's demanding that precision, heavily bunkered. It's that kind of green that you'd almost imagine it being a short 3 kind of from this direction. It wouldn't be out of place, would it? Now working back from that, well, where do you want to hit this approach from? Well, you want to be, I would say, for these 3 pins, you want to be taking these slopes out of play. So you want to be coming in from as far this side as possible. So you'll notice that actually there's an area you could hit from here, or kind of from here would be a full wedge. The other option you're going to have is all the way down here, which is tricky and leaving a pitch, but it's coming down the slope, but it might be a good option for this pin. Or my personal favourite way of playing the back pin was to have a pitch landing about here and just funneling gently down. And if you play my courses often, you'll notice that I try to allow you to have slopes that can help you, provided you use them creatively. You can also go dead over this, but we'll look at the second shot that you're hitting, because actually the way this fairway is cut is really interesting, I think. Now we then go back from here, and we go, well, where are you hitting your second shot from? Well, potentially just over here if you've carried, or potentially from around about here. If you're going from here, we'd said our 3 landing areas probably are about here. Maybe you're rolling up to here. Maybe you're clearing and going around about here. Or if you're being really bold and trying to take on the kind of furthest part, maybe you're ending up about here. This bunker was put in play to stop people bombing it with impunity when it was downwind. So actually that's not going to be in play for most tee shots, but when you spin the wind round and you're playing downwind, we wanted you to have a bit more to think about, because the burn's now out of play. You're able to drive over that. So now let's look at it from the tee and work out, well, where can you get to? Well, that one's probably your partial drive, or taking a 3-wood probably leaves you about to here, 270 odd with roll. Same up to about here, so you've got those as options. Or if we're going just to here, 295 driver, you're probably just about making that 25 feet downhill, yeah, and then rolling out to about here maybe, because we had very firm, very fast fairways and conditions. So when we look at those, your tee shot first of all matters. In the old game, this was doable with a fast pretty easily. 295 driver slightly less so, but it's still doable. Now let's look about where you can reach. Well, if you're taking from here, so we can hit to there, but it's a very tiny portion of fairway, and you're hitting 200 yards. You're having to just crest this bunker, which you really do not want to be in. Joe did a masterful job sculpting this one, and it's just mean. So you want to be just clearing that, so you're hitting around a 4-iron probably, which is rolling out to maybe around about here. Then you look at where the fairway's cut and where this burn is going. It's pushing you further and further right, which, guess what, is your less ideal angle. So the question then becomes, well, if you're over here, could you clear over to here? Yeah, you probably can. And then you're looking at the ground and thinking, well, I can maybe hit a 5-wood to 230 odd. That's a bit of a push. And then you've got this spine which funnels you a little bit further down here, so maybe if you get a really good 3-wood, that's funneling you down here, but again, you don't want to run out and have heavy rough in, so you're still thinking about that. You can reach this area here, mark it with a little X here, but it's really tough and it's going to require 2 excellent shots to open up that green a little bit more. Your next option is reaching down to this bit here. Actually, that's a 4-iron and that's your safe play. It's just, again, we were pushing you deliberately into that angle that you probably didn't want for your pitch shot. Now, is this how I would design this hole in the new game? Probably not, but once again, this was designed to host an open championship. It was meant to be really flipping tough, and it proved it. Now let's say you didn't take that carry on. What are you left with? How do those options change? So now suddenly to hit this area, you're hitting your 5-wood right into this sort of gap. Probably a little bit of fade and trying to roll it around, or you're hitting 3-wood and just clearing this. It's going to have longer rollouts, so you're maybe worried about the end of the fairway, or you're laying back up here just in front of it. You've got a little bit of a mound, so you've got an uneven lie. You can play 6-iron or so, and then you've got a full 9-iron in here, which was the sensible way to play the hole. If you want to play it as a true 3-shotter, you'd play short of the water there, short of the bunker here, and hit a 9-iron in, because actually when you think about it, if you were going with a par 4 where you're hitting 9-iron or pitching wedge in, you'd view that as a decent-ish scoring opportunity. It's just because it's a par 5, people don't want to play it like this, which is where you can get really interesting with how you design it. So that was one option. If you'd laid up back to here, or to the fat of the fairway, or you're taking out this option of carrying this bunker completely. You've got no chance of doing that, so you're forcing that layup on there, but you've done that by how you've played it off the tee. And when you're doing that, you're really making that decision as well. So I hope that you found this video useful, and it's given you some ideas into how you might want to design a 3-shot par 5. I don't want to stress that not every single course should have one of these, but it's something that I think when you do it and practice it a little bit, it will enhance your skills in understanding strategy and how to really design for what-if scenarios of when I put this shot here, what am I left with? And how you might lead one shot into another. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and see you again soon.